You're listening to the Monocle Daily, first broadcast on the 25th of June 2025 on Monocle Radio.
Turkey's president sits at the top table with Donald Trump, and the country breathes a sigh of relief over the ceasefire between Israel and Iran. We explore the bitter feud over flags on French municipal buildings and how many is too many tourists. One village of 100 residents is bracing for 100,000 visitors. I'm Emma Nelson, and the Monocle Daily starts now. Hello and a very warm welcome to the Monocle Daily, coming to you from a very warm Paris. We're in Studio 5 in 16 Rue Bachamont. French Week is now into day 3, and I'm going to be examining the price of a hotel breakfast and meeting the co-founder of Horace on a mission to make men's skin the most beautiful it can be. My guests, Colette Davidson and Francis Collins, will talk about the day's big stories. So stay tuned. This is the Monocle Daily. And a very warm welcome to a very fresh Studio 5. Colette Davidson and Francis Collins, both Paris-based correspondents. Francis, you're former Istanbul correspondent for TRT World. So in a minute we'll be going to be talking about Turkey and its role in events in the Middle East. But both of you, how are you finding Paris today? Because everybody woke up this morning to these sort of wall-to-wall warnings about superheat, that somewhere in Paris today the mercury will hit 40 centigrade Celsius, which is bananas. But actually, I find it quite an enjoyable place. Am I the only person on earth who's enjoying this?
I'm enjoying it, I've got to say. It's pleasant, but it's a bit different. I tell you what it does do, it slows down the tourists. And normally especially if you come the way I did to the studio, I fight my way past Notre Dame and Saint Michel and come across the bridge from the Ile de Cité. There's tourists everywhere. I've noticed they are cowering in the shadows a bit, and they're slower, which is welcome. We like to see tourists, but there's a lot of them, and they're all year round these days. We
got a bit stuck on Rue Rambuteau this afternoon because it was ice cream. We've clearly worked out that 16 hours is ice cream o'clock, and yes, it was like, I'm terribly sorry. We've just nipped out for a moment. Could you move? Because we actually have some radio to make, and there is that sort of emptiness of head that a tourist has when in possession of a large ice cream.
Well, it really is ice cream season. I mean, the lines go down the block, and it's not just tourists, it's the locals too. We can't get enough. In France, the 4:30 is the goûter time. And so what better goûter to have than an ice cream?
Talk me through this, because yesterday when we were on the Monocle Daily, as soon as we started, I said, okay, what time is this? And this is apéro time. So this is 1900, we're on to apéro time, but 4:30 you're saying is snack time.
Oh, absolutely. The school children get out of school at 4:30, and they are waiting at the door for their chocolate cookies.
Excellent. And is this just limited to children, or can everyone have a goûter?
I mean, sometimes I partake, but, we can't do that every day for our figures.
Such a French answer. Look, let's talk about what's happening from the view from Istanbul at the moment, because Turkey is arguably breathing a sigh of relief at the ceasefire between Israel and Iran. There were fears that a deepening conflict next door in Iran would lead to a spillover of violence and also an increase in the number of refugees. But how much of a role has Ankara really played behind the scenes in bringing about an end to the hostilities? Well, a little earlier today, Hannah Lucinda Smith, who's Monocle's Istanbul correspondent, joined me from our studios in London. We were aware of the irony that is normally where I am sitting, but I began by asking her how much the pressure had built up in Turkey in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, Turkey sits in this kind of ring of geopolitical fire. Obviously, you've got, Syria over one border that's had this more than decade-long civil war. You've got Iraq as well. You've got Ukraine and Russia just over the Black Sea border. And to add another conflict into that would have been, really, really problematic for Turkey. Not only, the risk of blowback, also the risk of a new refugee wave coming over the border, but also, complicating Turkey's position within its region.
And just talking about the position of Turkey, and most notably the position of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, he for the last few days has been saying that he's been engaged in intensive diplomatic efforts to try to curb the conflict. And he was calling, or there were calls with Vladimir Putin, Iranian leaders, and generally top Middle Eastern leaders. How useful do you think this was?
Well, Erdogan has spent the past year or so, particularly the past few months, trying to carve out a place for himself and for Turkey as a mediating country, a country that can step into these big conflicts that we're seeing in the world right now and provide either a back channel or a kind of table for negotiations. We saw him doing that between Russia and Ukraine, and he's been able to do that because of the relationship that he's built with Vladimir Putin. But he's also been trying to do that between Israel and Iran. Now, this is obviously far more problematic because Erdogan sort of has skin in this game. He's positioned himself in the Iran-Palestine conflict as a really staunch supporter of the Palestinians. And, in particular, he's got these relationships with Hamas leaders as well. And that's something that's, really, really irritating to Israel. So he's certainly not a trusted partner for Israel, but also for Iran as well. The Turkey-Iran relationship is also not a simple one. They're kind of regional power rivals. They were, on opposite sides in the Syrian conflict. And after the fall of Bashar al-Assad, there have been some quite kind of harsh words exchanged between Tehran and Ankara. Tehran has accused Ankara of, playing a role in the deposition of Bashar al-Assad. Turkey, meanwhile, has accused Iran of supporting parts of the PKK, the Kurdish militant group. So that's not an easy relationship either. But he does, hold this position of being a leader in this region who has some kind of stability, who has some kind of respect in the West, and also who has the ear of other Muslim powers, including Iran to a certain extent as well.
And this idea of him being the mediator for everybody, how credible is it? You have just given us a list of problems, and one wonders just how credible a mediator Erdogan can be, and indeed how credible a meeting point Turkey therefore is.
Yeah, I think here's the thing. No mediator is going to be without their problems. And we're in this era now where the people or the institutions who would have done mediation, say, 20 years ago, the UN, the US, parts of Europe, neutral Europe, they just don't do it anymore for various reasons. And many of the parties in conflicts don't trust those institutions as mediators anymore. We saw in the Syrian conflict, what started out with a UN peace process in Geneva, negotiations there, just didn't go anywhere. And in the end, it was Russia, Iran and Turkey that took over and started the Astana process. I think what we're going to see is these kind of middle powers, places like Turkey, increasingly coming to the fore as places that can provide a table for negotiations, even if they're not completely trusted as mediators by both sides or by either side. They can provide some kind of middle ground. And I think one of the really interesting things is about Turkey and about other countries as well that might sort of step into this role. Turkey isn't a signatory to the Rome Statute, for example. So that means that, if Vladimir Putin or Benjamin Netanyahu were to come to Turkey, it's not bound by the International Criminal Court to enact the arrest warrant that's out on them. Although Turkey is a member of NATO, Erdogan has also pursued these other relationships that are very much outside the NATO alliance with countries like Russia, also with Iran to a certain extent. So he has this kind of foot in both camps. And I think that's going to be, a really, really valuable attribute for mediating countries in the years ahead.
That was Hannah Lucinda Smith, Monocle's Istanbul correspondent, joining me a little earlier from London. Francis, I'll come to you about the fact that in the absence of mediators, is Turkey really that place that people will want to go to? Because there isn't a lot of trust, is there?
Well, it's a yes and a no. I think Hannah is right that Erdogan, who we have to bear in mind is a very skilled political practitioner, he tends to not so much knee-jerk but think things through. He is very good at playing people off against each other. He had problems with the Biden administration in the United States when he was getting a defense system from Russia. And, of course, Turkey, as mentioned, is a NATO member, has been since the early 1950s. So you had a situation where you had NATO weaponry on the ground at bases like Incirlik in the south of Turkey, which is used by the US Air Force alongside proposed Russian defensive systems. It didn't really go down too well. But he does it for often very tactical reasons. Turkey is at the centre of a lot of things these days, just because of where it's located geographically, but it also likes to be at the centre. Respect is very important, and bringing people to quite often the lovely Dolmabahce Palace on the banks of the Bosphorus for talks, be it Russia and Ukraine, which they've done a couple of times, be it last week when he was trying to bring people for discussions regarding Iran. It is something that, in a sense, boosts the esteem of the country, of the government, and tries to reinforce him, I think, as someone very large on the international stage. And he's got good relations, of course, with President Trump.
Indeed, and just looking, apparently he's had 3 conversations with Donald Trump in the last 10 days, which is obviously boosting his profile. However, to have such a close relationship of Donald Trump is not straightforward nowadays. And is there a fear that this could come back to bite him?
Yes, I think there's always that fear, because no one really knows what Donald Trump is going to do the next day, the next hour. There have been people who were part of his last administration who've written articles and books saying that they thought they had an agreement with Trump on how to proceed diplomatically, and the last person in the room would often be the person to change Trump's mind. I think less so now, because Trump does seem to have a different air about him. It's almost like an air of confidence. I've been re-elected again. They go back quite a way, Erdogan and Trump, and I think they understand each other. There was quite a funny thing a few years ago when Erdogan went to the White House and Trump gave a very short introductory 1-minute speech, and Erdogan is well known for speaking for a very, very long time. He could be opening a youth club in the south of Turkey. He will talk for half an hour if he wants to. He set off talking, and I think a good 30 minutes later, Trump was hanging onto the podium, trying to stand upright because it was exhausting, and Erdogan was still pressing his point home. So I think when it comes to that sort of, you could argue, macho speak, or the way that people like this perform politically, Erdogan does seem to know what he's doing with Donald Trump.
Thank you for that, Francis. No macho speaking here. Colette Davidson and Francis Cullings are my guests on today's Monocle Daily, coming to you live from Studio 5 in Paris. And Paris, and indeed the wider area of France, you see flags absolutely everywhere. And one buildings in particular, the tricolore, is a kind of an elegant reminder of where you are and what your country stands for. But there have been some quite furious rows breaking out about the flying of flags to make a political statement. Several provincial mayors have been told to remove either Israeli or Palestinian flags from their buildings, which they've put up in support of their chosen side in the Gaza war. And some mayors have refused when people have asked them to take it down. Most notably, the mayor of Nice, who won't take down an Israeli flag. I mean, what happened to the principles of neutrality in public services, Colette? I think that's what we talked to about, isn't it? Do we know what the rules governing the flying of flags on buildings is?
Yeah, we do. There are some laws around it. So you talk about neutrality. The symbols or flags that hang on government buildings are supposed to be neutral. That could be up for debate, however, and these items are only supposed to be up for a limited time. That's kind of part of the law. So if you look at Brittany, you could have a Brittany flag in a town in Brittany and argue that that was neutral. But of course, this is up for debate. We saw this last year with the Ukrainian flag, which many city halls hung on their town halls in support, in solidarity. And judges ruled that those town halls were in the right, that they had the right to do that. Of course, now when you have similar situations with the Palestinian flag, notably the Paris suburb of Montreuil, they had a flag of Palestine, and they were ordered to take it down. This city hall argued that it was in solidarity, in support of Palestine and Gaza, but the judges didn't see it that way. So there is a law, but it's movable, let's say.
And you see, Francis, just by reading into this a little bit, that the intense political nature of mayors, the fact that, the mayor of Nice has said, I am not taking down that flag. I mean, Nice is a hugely important city in the south of France. It has an enormous international reputation. It has been subject to terror attacks. Therefore, one would imagine that you would try and keep things on a little bit of a level, just to make sure that no one is alienated and no one is angered.
It's almost like we're straying into this area whereby, and I think it pertains to many conflicts, but certainly what's going on in Gaza and Israel. If you fly an Israeli flag, does that mean you're supporting the actions of the Israeli government, or are you just supporting Israel? If you fly a Palestinian flag, are you deemed to be supporting Hamas or supporting the future Palestinian state? Now, it may become a little bit clearer in the weeks ahead because Macron is talking about recognizing the Palestinian state. So you could then argue we're supporting the country as it stands now. So I think that it seems to stir up a lot of things that, you're right, Colette, we didn't get with Ukraine because it seemed to be a blanket acceptance. Ukraine is being, attacked and invaded by Russia. But there should be some sort of consistency there.
Well, indeed. I mean, people got very, very fired up when Pope Francis died, didn't they?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that. So France's Prime Minister, François Bayrou, he suggested, bringing all the French flags to half-mast when Pope Francis died. And this, of course, really angered the left, who said, what about the separation of church and state? And France is supposed to be this secular country. You've maybe heard the word laïcité. And so that definitely ruffled some feathers.
And tell us a little bit more, therefore, about how this gets resolved. Because in the last week or two, we've seen in the United Kingdom a Northern Ireland band finding itself in front of a court because the lead singer, foolishly or not, rather unwisely, was given a flag by a supporter of Hezbollah and draped it around his shoulders while on stage. It's caused an enormous brouhaha and has ended up with him appearing in court facing terrorist charges.
And this is a band called Kneecap, so you could argue they do have a fairly provocative stance when it comes to Irish politics anyway.
Indeed. And does that suggest about France, perhaps, that openness to have a debate is rather healthy, that you don't need to get the courts involved, or it's a bit dangerous because mayors are snubbing the Elysee Palace?
I guess if it's not fixed down as Colette's been describing, and mayors do have this right to say no, then almost any flag could be flown. If you have a mayor who suddenly decides he's retrospectively supporting the Viet Cong, I don't know. Can they fly any flag at all if they're going to say no? But certainly I do think that this current situation, we see it in other cities as well when it comes to protests. If you're waving a Palestinian flag, are you promoting Palestine? We see it in London a lot. And again, as I say, are you supporting this Israeli government and their actions, which most people will agree have been horrific in Gaza, or are you just supporting Israel as a country?
You're listening to the Monocle Daily with me, Emma Nelson, here at Studio 5 in Paris, joined around the table by Colette Davidson and Francis Collings. Now, let us pity a tiny, pretty village of Gerberoy. It's an astonishing victim of its own success. A quick car ride north of Paris will take you to a bucolic paradise. If you go there, you're transported to a medieval jewel, black and white timbered buildings, climbing roses. It's lovely. In fact, it is so beautiful. 100,000 people traipse through its cobbled streets every single year, which is rather irksome to the 100 or so inhabitants. Who wants to kick this thing off? Because we're going to come to the wider issue of over-tourism, but this is mind-boggling, isn't it? You could be standing at your kitchen sink doing your washing up, and 1,000 people a day are going through this place.
And it's because of the flowers and the roses primarily that they go to this place?
Yes, and there are beautiful historic buildings and little quaint winding streets, but I think it is primarily the roses that are bringing people.
Which is about now. And the worst problem with this is that as soon as we've heard about this story, our immediate reaction is, we've got to go there and have a look.
Of course.
So you have this terrible problem that you want to go and see how bad it is, but also you want to go and see how pretty it is. Being a victim of your own success is really just borne out with these guys.
It's also a modern phenomenon because perhaps 10, 12 years ago, if you read a travel article about a place, you might go there. Well, these days, and I know this from Spain, where I'm often in villages in Andalusia, they do get a lot of people, TikTokers, who are coming along and dancing around in front of good restaurants and everything else. The difference is in in the part of southern Spain I know quite well is that it is welcome because it brings a lot of economy into towns which otherwise could be somewhat impoverished. And you see that in parts of Italy, certainly parts of Spain, where some villages are just completely emptied. So it's sort of accepted, but often I'm with friends saying, don't post this on social media because we want to keep this place selfishly fairly quiet. But these days, things can become very, very well known very quickly.
Don't worry, I shall ask Francis where he goes later. It just is really unpleasant when you get 1,000 people in your street in one day. So tell us, this idea of this is over tourism at its absolute zenith, isn't it?
Oh, it absolutely is. And as you mentioned, this is by far not the only town or city in Europe facing over tourism. This has become a bigger problem in recent years. We've heard about Venice charging tourists €5 to enter the city walls, or Barcelona with the locals spraying tourists with water pistols. I mean, this is just part of a wider trend kind of to stop over tourism, but no one really has a great solution at this point. This little town of Jabevois has talked about maybe charging tourists for guided tours or charging people during the high season, and then some more concrete solutions like creating more parking outside of the town to just kind of streamline things and make daily life a little bit easier.
I don't know if you noticed, I think it was in Le Monde, the article that was about this town, where they were explaining what was going wrong, how difficult it was, and then right at the end of the article they helpfully said if you wanted to go there, you can leave from Paris on the A16 motorway in the direction of Amiens to Beauvais, take exit 14 or 15 and follow the Trésor. So there you go. The newspaper saying it's overpopulated, it's over tourist, but you can go there tomorrow.
I don't think you're helping. Look, let's carry on talking about tourism and holidays and fun, and when fun sort of knocks you sideways, let's talk about another victim of tourism, but in a different kind. A man took his family for breakfast at a Disney resort. We can debate the merits of that in a moment. But he ended up almost breaking the bank. The gentleman in question was called John Tolkien and shared his receipt of $930 after eating at Disney Princess Breakfast Adventures in Disneyland, California. Again, we can debate the merits of your choice of going to Disney Princess Breakfast Adventures. I suspect it might not have been where he really wanted to go. But he took his family of five, $937. That's a lot of money for a breakfast.
That's a lot of money. I was thinking about this while I was reading about this article. How would I get my money's worth in food? I'm not sure that I could physically eat enough to say I really earned that $142 breakfast, which is what it costs for each person. And I read about the types of food that they had: lobster rolls, cornbread, waffles, deviled eggs, ribs. These are not exactly, I guess, my personal dream of a breakfast, but apparently this dad had a lot of fun. He said the actors were really professional. Everyone had a great time with the princesses and the activities. So he said he almost spit out his coffee when he saw the bill, but overall he enjoyed the experience.
I hope he didn't, because that would have cost him about $50 worth of coffee. And you're sitting, oh my goodness, so this is quite an image. We have the characters wandering round while you're chowing down on ribs and lobster rolls. Francis is shaking his head.
It's not for me in the mornings, I have to say. I'm not really much of a chatter. I need to be quiet. I think it's my idea of a nightmare. And I tell you something else which is a bit more, as a European, quite offensive. It's the tip. It's $150 tip as well. And I've had many fights over the years when I've been to the United States about paying the tip, because of course as a European you think it should be based on service and quality. Maybe the quality was good, but I was thrown out of a Cuban restaurant in Miami years ago for refusing the tip, which was exorbitant, and this seems quite exorbitant too.
What do you like when you go to a restaurant then?
I tip quite happily if it's good service, but it's the bolted on enormous tips you have to pay in the United States, which of course is supporting all the waiters and waitresses.
But if it were a Disney princess giving you the bill, maybe you would be more apt to give a tip.
Yeah,
it's got a good point.
It's a very good point. Yeah, got me there.
Okay, and it opens the wider question about the merit of the hotel breakfast. I am now increasingly becoming of the opinion that if you're going to book yourself into a hotel, they should at least offer you something to eat the next morning. Yet it is now becoming one of those increasing bolt-ons, as is the "would you like your room cleaned" thing. And I'm just wondering where all this is leading, given the fact that, you know, if you are going to spend money on a breakfast, that is where the hotel will actually make quite a lot of money. Or will it? Because there'll be a lot of wastage, I'm assuming.
Well, I mean, it kind of reminds me of how airlines are charging for every little thing. Now hotels are also charging for every little thing. And these breakfasts are not cheap. We're talking, you know, 16 euros, 20 euros, which is more than you would ever spend for a breakfast, which most of us only eat a bowl of cereal or a slice of toast or something in the morning. So it does beg the question of waste and the necessity and in terms of the cleaning costs, I do wonder if that's a climate issue, if people are trying to cut back on water usage, or if it's just for cost-cutting
What do you think of that? Do you think it's a climate issue, Francis?
Well, they do tell you this, you know, you got to get a nice little sign with the towels saying, you know, because of the climate, you know, say if you want to have your towels refreshed or not. I did see a comedian a few years ago talking about the UK, saying that Britain was turning into a Ryanair country where you're going to get the basics, but anything else you've got to pay for on top, you know, which may be unfair on Ryanair because other airlines do the same, although I think there's legislation coming in soon to stop them from charging you for extra bags in the cabin. But it does seem that way that I mean, speaking as someone who has travelled quite a bit as a journalist, I worked for one office whereby when they booked the hotel rooms for us, the breakfast will be included for about €5 a day. So we'd say include the breakfast, and the office would say no, because you're getting a daily stipend, you should pay for your own breakfast, which will be about 30 or 40 euros a day. So booking ahead can actually help.
Colette Davidson and Francis Collings, will have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me in the studio. You are listening to the Monocle Daily, day 3 of our trip to the French capital, Paris. We are in a sweltering French capital this afternoon. It is absolutely glorious. And we need to say fresh and beautiful, obviously. So let's hear now from the founder of a gorgeous French skincare brand for men. Marc Terlet's company, Horace, offers not only every grooming product a man could dream of. He also uses his website as a fountain of useful information about how to look after your skin. Good evening to you both. And it just so happens we've been gate crashed. Good evening, Tyler. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you, Emma?
It's good to have our editorial director, Tyler Brulot, who's come in to discuss beauty, skincare, and I'll get you on hotels.
That's why I'm here, right?
I'll get you on hotel. Looking radiant, ladies and gentlemen. But you, Mark, hello, good evening. For those of us who may not have spritzed or spread or just indulged in a little bit of Horace, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Hello.
Good evening.
Really
Welcome.
happy to be here in a very hot day in Paris. Bonsoir. And so yeah, I'm the CEO, co-founder of Horace, which is a men's and grooming and fragrance brand from Paris. And we started 9 years ago. And we basically make sure that any guy can find anything he wants. So from shower gel, deodorant, face cleanser, moisturizer, SPF, fragrance, you name it, we have it. And we've become, in a few years, the #1 men's skincare brand in France.
Wonderful. And what is the story behind actually making sure that fighting in a very, very busy market, how did you make sure that what you did was noticed and then flew?
I mean, one of the main things is we did it in a very authentic way. And I mean, true to who we are, both as founder, Kim and I, meaning that it would be a brand that speaks to men in a very normal way, not in a sort of childish way that is, or uber masculine way, which is usually either one of them or both, so very often both. And at the same time, being able to have like very neat packaging, great quality, and yet being still super accessible, because I mean, like, a moisturizer is 15 euros, a fragrance is 62. So the whole point was like, how can we be timeless and have like a very good brand?
Tyler, he's making it sound super easy.
Yes, absolutely. But it is easy, and this is what I think is interesting. And it's not the only reason why Mark is here. He actually has this habit already, and we've not been in Paris very long as an operation. He always sort of shows up when there's a big party. So last time he was here was the launch of the brand, and we were literally showered in products, and I can talk about those products at length. But the good news is I knew about the brand, of course, beforehand, and I think what is interesting is you navigate very tricky territory because there is this sense of, as you said, it's very normal, but there is something very premium about the packaging. But it's also available at Monoprix as well. That's where I sort of properly discovered it. I'd seen it elsewhere, but actually I liked that it was at Monoprix. And yeah, that's where I purchased some of my purchase, not through a press kit or something. And I think, as you know, it's very hard to get that balance right of actually sitting in a retailer like that. Of course, I think most of our listeners know where Monoprix sits. It's sort of, yes, it's a mass retailer, but it's at, let's say, the slightly higher end as a mass retailer, and you're present there, but alongside all of the big competitors as well.
What made you decide? Because you'd be sitting next to, you'd have L'Oreal on your hands to Nivea, and obviously they are nowhere near as as refined. Although hats off to both brands, they're nowhere near as refined as you. So you how much of a how did that feel when you just went, we're going to do Monoprix? That must have been sort of quite thrilling, but quite daunting too.
Honestly, no. Because most of our business is direct. So we operate 18 stores in France, soon 19.
Where's the next one?
The next one is in Nice and in Val d'Europe, which is a shopping mall outside of Paris near Disneyland. I love Disneyland. And that's the whole point. And so we have a huge e-commerce website as well. So Monoprix for us was, just like pharmacies in France, a way to reach people in a broader way than our store, because we have stores in the main cities of France, but we cannot be in the smaller ones. So Monoprix pharmacies allow us to, go deeper in the market and be accessible, which is the whole point of the brand.
There is a deep love for the pharmacy, though, in France that perhaps one sees nowhere else on earth. I mean, my case is half empty because I know where I'm going before I go to the Eurostar.
You like a Swiss pharmacy, though, as well?
I like a Swiss, but a French one takes some beating.
Different level.
Absolutely different level. It goes incredibly chemical and clinical very, very quickly. That's kind of not what you do, though, is it? You have a much more...
we actually do. We have very targeted serum. For example, we have a bioretinol, which comes from microalgae, has the same effect of bioretinol, but without the drawbacks. So we can go very chemical.
I didn't fall for that.
It works. Bioretinol is amazing. I'm 39.
Listen, I'm ready to be sold.
What did you fall for?
Listen, we're our household. We're converts for one of your shower soaps. Fantastic. Ran out.
Thank you.
Got to get down to Nice and get another. Or open a shop in Zurich.
That would be nice. And the international pitch. Tell us about where Horace goes next.
We've been growing very fast in the UK. We opened a store a year ago. Our e-commerce website is going very well. We're looking to open more stores because one in London is not much. We have 6 in Paris in comparison. So we need at least 6 as well in London. And we're expanding in the US, mostly online now, but we will have a good news hopefully in September of offline. Not our own store, I'll be honest, but a very good
shop and shop.
Very good retail partner.
Okay. Biggest question from someone.
Nordstrom.
I can say.
He's smiling.
Nordstrom.
He's smiling. Biggest question from several people in this building and indeed
beyond. Say our callers. I thought you said the switchboard is lighting up, Emma.
That would be fun. Sort of. Tell us when you're going to do 100 millilitres travel sizes, because that's the only thing that anyone ever thinks of.
Hopefully soon.
Good. Thank you very much.
We're already on his case at the party after sort of many drinks, saying, when is just that's the great thing also about a French pharmacy, right? Yep. The minis section.
The minis.
Buying all of the minis is, it's the best.
It's the only thing.
You need to have Horace everywhere you go, anywhere you go.
There you go. We'll take that massive advert.
We are on the case on the travel minis with.
Brilliant. Let me sort of talk to you a little bit earlier today. On the daily, we've been talking, Tyler, about over tourism, about this tiny village called Gerberoy. 1,000 people in a village of 100. That's a bit mind-boggling.
It is a bit mind-boggling. But did they ask for it?
what the people doing their washing up.
Well, exactly.
I suspect they were quite happy there. And also the hotel breakfast at £900.
I don't know. Listen, Disney was involved. Maybe you'd like it. Have you introduced your family to the $900 breakfast at Disney if you love it so much?
Never in my life. My mom was a midwife. It's completely out of her range.
Do you think they have, but what's it called? It's called the Princess Breakfast or something.
Let me just get the thing of it. It's a long name.
Yeah,
just give me a moment,
do you know about the
please.
special Princess Breakfast? Do they have it at Disney Paris?
It's the Disney Princess Breakfast Adventure.
What is that?
Well,
do you have
it's
daughters?
Expensive.
I have a kid and he can be into princess.
Okay, you have
Okay, that's fine.
There you go.
Excellent. Well,
That's your Sunday sorted for you.
and the next,
Might be.
and you're never leaving the house again because it's so expensive.
Hey, listen, Ohats is doing well. I mean, they've signed that massive department store deal in the US.
We can splurge on that. Maybe. I don't know. I need you to maybe ask my wife. I'm not sure you would go for it.
Marc Charlet, thank you so much for joining us
Thank
in
you
the
for having me.
studio. And Horace can be found everywhere.
Exactly.
Thank you. Finally, on today's programme, our regular on this day historical lecture from Andrew Muller. He talks about June the 25th, 1950, when North Korea invaded South Korea, beginning the still unended Korean War.
It is not the longest war ever fought. Indeed, depending on how one measures these things, it's not even close. The Reconquista, for example, the interminable campaigns in which the Christian kingdoms of Europe eventually prized the Muslim caliphate off the Iberian Peninsula, ground on for 750 years or so, ending with the fall of Grenada in 1492. On form, however, the Korean War might yet give the Reconquista and a few other obdurately unceasing historical conflicts a run for their money. We are technically 75 years in as of today. At which assertion an amount of puzzlement might be expressed. The Korean War is commonly held to have occurred between 1950 and 1953. This is true inasmuch as those were the dates of the start and finish of full-scale state-on-state conflict between North Korea, South Korea and their respective allies. But hostilities were only curtailed by an armistice, not a treaty. Officially, North Korea and South Korea are still at war. That war began on June 25th, 1950. As is so very often the case, a line drawn on a map in a bid to solve a problem had instead caused one. The problem was essentially this. In the final days of World War II, as the Soviet Union attempted to wring some benefit from the surrender of Japan, the Red Army seized the northern reaches of Korea, which had been a Japanese colony since 1910. The United States, which was, remember, on the same side as the Soviet Union at this point, pitched a division of the Korean peninsula along the 38th parallel. Everything north of it would remain in Moscow's ambit, overseen by a Korean communist militia commander and lunatic called Kim Il-sung, and a temporary American-led military administration would govern the south. US General Douglas MacArthur took time out from running Japan to lend his authority to the plan.
Huge crowds listened eagerly to the general's speech, emphasizing American recognition of the Korean government. Another nation of the Far East takes its place among the new democracies.
MacArthur would shortly have cause to return, with an army behind him, because...
So now it's goodbye, Maria, I'm off to Korea, far across the sea.
The partition of the Korean peninsula worked about as straightforwardly and seamlessly as cleaving one nation into two generally does. See also Ireland, Cyprus, India, much of the Middle East, etc. and etc. During the late 1940s, North Korea fought in two directions, aiding Mao Zedong's communists in the Chinese Civil War occurring to their north, and fomenting a communist insurrection in South Korea, in the hope of eventually uniting the peninsula under Kim's rule. And crucially, with World War II won, the US and the USSR had fallen somewhat dramatically out. By By 1950, Stalin had come round to Kim's way of thinking. The communists had triumphed in China. The US had withdrawn the forces it had stationed in South Korea after the war. And as of August 1949, the Soviet Union was nuclear armed. With Stalin's permission and Mao's support, Kim ordered his divisions across the 38th parallel with a view to smiting the traitorous running dogs of the capitalist South.
통일되지 않고 또는 우리 조국을 분열할 위기를 배격하지 않고 우리 조국의 남쪽 반도를 미대국주의자의 식민지로.
Words to that effect anyway. Not for the last time in military history, however, it was discovered that starting a war is the easy part. Kim, Mao and Stalin had overestimated the welcome they would receive from South Koreans, underestimated the resolve of South Korea's allies, and failed entirely to take seriously the fledgling United Nations established 5 years previously. The People's Republic of China had not yet been admitted as a member, and the Soviet Union was boycotting the UN as a consequence. The UN Security Council, with no Soviet veto to stop them, passed resolutions 82 and 83. The former condemned North Korea's attack, the latter called for South Korea's defense. By July, the United States was at war. A UN force would join them in September, comprising not only many of the West's traditional allies, but troops from Colombia, South Africa and Ethiopia.
It is not strange that Ethiopians should be fighting aggression so far from home, for they have taken their rightful place among the free and independent nations of the world.
When the armistice was grudgingly agreed 3 years later, nearly 3 million Koreans had been killed on both sides, mostly civilians, along with perhaps 100,000 Chinese and 40,000 or so American and or UN troops. The two rival capitals, Pyongyang and Seoul, smouldered in ruins. In one of history's grimmer jokes, hostilities were ceased along the 38th parallel, i.e. exactly where the two sides had been pawing the ground 3 years previously. South Korea can claim to have won the peace, even if it is not technically peace so long as no treaty is signed. South Korea today is a widely admired economic and cultural powerhouse and a vigorous, verging on rowdy democracy. North Korea is a cloistered cult compound ruled at the whim of a third-generation Kim. The war which began on this day 75 years ago changed a great deal, and not very much. For Monocle Radio, I'm Andrew Muller.
Thank you, Andrew. It's 1940 here in Paris. Welcome back to Studio 5. Our editorial director, Tyler Brûlé. You've popped in to say good evening. It is lovely to see you in the new studio. It's bedding in now. It feels as if we've sort of got a handle on it now. We've always had a handle on it, but we're up and running properly.
We are, absolutely. New microphones, new setup. We can't call in drone strikes anymore like we did, or also land multiple aircraft at many airports in and around Paris. I mean, you could have controlled sort of runways at Le Bourget and Charles de Gaulle. I could have done all of the Transavia flights coming into Orly, because listeners, we used to have these headsets, so it was earphones, but then with sort of a mic attached, like you would if you were sort of commenting on a football match or something. But now we have proper table microphones, a big conversation within the audio world at Monocle, because we have, of course, the metro is running right under our feet, maybe 7 or 8 meters below us.
I'm quite happy with that.
I haven't really heard it as well.
Hang on.
Here it comes. Listeners, can you hear that? We can feel it, but I don't know if you really hear it. Anyway.
Apparently it's line 3.
Okay, it's line 3.
Okay, we've been reliable.
Underneath Studio 5.
Absolutely, it's absolutely great. A big week for Monocle this week, isn't it? There's a big party, there's a big gathering, everybody's diving in. Big
everything. A lot of people over here this week, and of course, much is going on. Last week, of course, was the air show, menswear. Listen, when you leave this studio, Emma, you sort of saw a little preview of what was happening. I stepped out for a moment just before I came on air. There's a man actually wearing a headset. Part of the street, of course, has been sort of now paved in white. There are white benches. There is some movie being made, or it's supposed to be a fashion show, but I think you might call it an activation. There are people running around in trainers. I'm not quite sure what it is, but we'll be out of the studio in a matter of minutes, and we'll get to the bottom of it.
Are we joining in?
I hope not. Place de Victoire, when we were over there, did you see? I mean, amazing that the whole, I mean, the whole place, it's round. They've got train tracks for of course, all of the cameras. I don't know what show is being, of course, staged there, but the city is just alive.
It knows
menswear, and then you've got couture coming up as well, and it feels like the world is here right now.
What are you looking forward to most about your trip to Paris? Because you're now a regular commuter here.
And I actually haven't been here for a while because there's been so much Middle East. There's been a lot of Southeast Asia, etc. But great to be back. I'm looking forward to, as you said, we have a party tomorrow evening. It is going to be talk about a circuit tomorrow night. There are so many parties for menswear tomorrow evening. I think we're going to be a pretty good ticket on this street. So just, fantastic to see our readers and our partners and everyone that we work with. That's going to happen tomorrow evening. And then, of course, there's just a lot going on in terms of so many different brands presenting, and it's amazing. We've talked about this topic many times, but how Paris has really sort of stuck. A lot of cities can try to mount various events, etc., but when you talk about an epicenter of talent for fashion, for design, it's all here right now.
It just gets on with it.
It does.
Tyler, we'll let you go and carry on managing everything that's going to come in the next couple of days. That's all the time we have for today's edition of the Monocle Daily. The warmest of thanks to all my panellists, Colette Davidson and Francis Collings. On the line, Hannah Lucinda Smith back in London. In the studio, Mark Charlet, and of course our editorial director, Tyler Brûlé. And thanks to our producer, Tom Webb, and our sound engineer, Flynn Simons. I'm Emma Nelson here in Paris. We'll be back for day 4 of French Week tomorrow. I hope you can join us for that. But for now, goodbye. Thank you for listening. Au revoir.